everyone, and welcome to the Mountain Lion Foundation's Living with Lions series, an online uh, webinar and lecture series that we run here every month. My name's Josh Rosenow, and I'm the Director of Policy and Advocacy here. We're very excited to be joined this month by Tiffany Yap to talk about her graphic novel, Tales of the Urban Wild, A Puma's Journey. Tiffany is uniquely positioned to write this novel. She's a senior scientist at the Center for Biological Diversity, based out of Oakland, and is the primary author of the petition that Center for Biological Diversity and Mountain Lion Foundation filed to list the Southern California and Central Coast mountain lions under the California Endangered Species Act. She also works to improve wildlife connectivity for critters large and small. She has a doctorate in environmental science and engineering, and published studies in Science, EcoHealth, and other scientific journals, and has had her writing featured in the New York Times, LA Times, San Francisco Chronicle, and NPR. And we're very excited to have her with us and to talk about this wonderful graphic novel about the life of a mountain lion in California. Not sure. There we go. Okay, now I can see you. Hi, Tiffany. Welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us, and thanks for this great book. I did want to before we get to the book, we mentioned the CISA petition, and I do from our members, I get questions about what's going on with that. That's been a couple of years that it was filed, and people are curious what's gonna come of it. I myself so curious sometimes too.
I think a lot of us are curious about it. Well, I think the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, they're still in their status review stage. So after it goes to candidacy and gets voted that listing is warranted, CDFW has to do a status review. And theoretically, they're supposed to get it done within a year, but it has been taking a lot longer than I think all of us had anticipated. And I think they're just trying to be very thorough in their status review. They want to get it right. And so we're still waiting for that review to come, hopefully end of this year or early next year. And in the meantime, glad to have the protections as a candidate species for the mountain lions in Southern California along the Central Coast.
Yeah, and that's I think an important thing that people should realize, that even without the official vote, the protections are in place provisionally until that happens. So we'd like to see that vote happen one of these days so that they get locked in.
Yeah.
But in this interim period, they are treating it as if it was listed, and we're getting a lot of those protections, and a lot of state policy is proceeding on that premise.
Yeah, that's right. I think one thing that would it is really great that they are getting protections right now, and having that listing become formalized would be really helpful for more proactive actions to protect the species. But in the meantime, you're right, we are working on other ways to kind of get species protected. So policies that have been in place in the past couple of years that the center has sponsored include AB 2344, which is the Safe Roads and Wildlife Protection Act, which requires Caltrans and CDFW to really look at where we need more wildlife crossings and implement them when they're doing new projects. And then also we've had a couple of rodenticide bills passed. So a couple of years ago, there were two rodenticide bills, and but both were signed. One was a couple of years ago, and then one was just this year. And so that essentially restricts the use of second generation rodenticides, and then also now first generation rodenticides, specifically difecinone, which has been found to be in a lot of not just mountain lions, but a lot of other predators and carnivore species in California.
Yeah, and has really serious health effects for mountain lions, we know, as well as for the other ones. We care about them too, but
yeah.
But here we are with the Mountain Lion Foundation, so we'll talk about that. But of course, you're not a mountain lion biologist by training. You came to that late. Started out with herps,
Yeah. In grad school, I studied disease and amphibians. That was kind of what my main focus was on. And because I don't know if folks here probably heard about it before, but chytridiomycosis is a really severe disease. It's killing a lot of frogs and salamanders around the world. There are two main pathogens that kind of cause really severe sickness and like slow death. And so it's really scary. And so I spent a lot of time studying like the impacts of that and like disease risk in areas where there are a lot of different kinds of amphibians. And then when I started working at the Center for Biological Diversity, all these studies started coming out about, how poorly the mountain lions, particularly in Southern California and along the Central Coast, are doing because they've been so boxed in by roads and development. And the genetic isolation and the severe inbreeding is really, causing them to decline substantially to the point where we're worried that they might become extinct within a few decades. And so I think that really prompted us to, and me to look into how we can protect these really special species.
Yeah. So how did you decide to tackle that through a graphic novel rather than the scientific publications that you're more used to putting out
Yeah.
there?
Yeah, so well, so the book was published through Reverberations Books, and the publisher there, his name is Greg Grouse, and he actually reached out to me after he had read an op-ed about wildlife connectivity and the importance of improving, building more wildlife crossings and making the landscape more permeable for mountain lions and wolves. And so he reached out to me and asked me if I would be interested in writing a graphic novel about the environment generally. And when I got the email, I was very surprised because it was like a very specific ask about writing a graphic novel, but then it was also very general about writing anything about the environment. But it was a really interesting idea to me, and at the time, I wasn't really sure what it would be. But after I thought about it a little bit, I was like, we're always trying to find ways to improve our messaging about why pumas are important on our landscape. People love them. They're really iconic species. They're ecosystem engineers, but they're just suffering so much because of us. Like car being hit by cars, being poisoned by rat poison, dying in wildfires because they can't get out because they're so boxed in. They can't get away from the wildfires. Getting into conflict with farm animals. There's just so many different ways that these poor mountain lions are suffering. And I think it seemed like a really good opportunity to tell that story in a way that was maybe more accessible than some of the other work that we do. And so, I brought the idea up and Greg was supportive. And so then we looked for an illustrator and we got to it.
Nice. And we'll have a reading towards the end of this before a Q&A session. So people should be thinking about their questions. But I how did you, so the book basically follows the life of one mountain lion. I won't give spoilers, but certainly from birth on. And is that an actual mountain lion, or is that a composite story?
It is a fictional story, but it is based on it's inspired by a lot of events that have actually happened. So it is kind of like an accumulation of the many different things that happened to multiple pumas in California.
Yeah, I was reading it. I kept thinking, yeah, no, that's a thing that actually happens. Hey, look,
Yeah,
no,
yeah,
that's real.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I wanted to make it as realistic as possible because, I think the story of mountain lions is really important and their role in the ecosystems is also really important. And I think they're often misunderstood. A lot of people are scared of them, just want to get rid of them. And that is actually more harmful to everybody. And so I kind of wanted to keep it as realistic as possible. And I also wanted to really highlight the other wildlife in California. And so all the different species that are being shown in the book are also specific species. But even things like, sometimes in the book there's like a a part where like a mountain lion gets scared of a automatic door. It triggers an automatic door and it just gets scared. And like that happens, you know, people there's what's great
Security
is
camera
there's
footage of that, yeah.
yeah, there's security camera footage, there's ring camera footage, there's more and more wildlife camera footage too. And so it's like this really amazing opportunity to show like people that like these things are actually happening in our backyards nearby, sometimes on main streets. And so so yeah, that was one thing that I really one of my main goals was to keep it as realistic as possible.
And the you know, just the nature of these animals is that we only see those little snippets of their lives. And so it's probably only through fiction that we can really see the full sweep of how a mountain lion experiences the world and the struggles that they go through. Because we do, you know, we get a moment on a trail cam, blips on a map from GPS collars,
right, yeah, and then also
until the GPS collar disappears.
Right, right, yeah, and then also the scientific studies, like the scientists, the researchers who study these animals really put a lot of information out there too, and talking to them and even hearing the stories that don't make it into the publications is just kind of like there's just so much, you know. It can be really sad and disheartening to hear all the ways mountain lions are being killed by us, either directly or indirectly. And so I think this kind of felt like something I could do to kind of help push for more protections and just get a little bit more understanding of what these animals are doing around us.
Yeah. And something I think about a lot, you know, talking with people about mountain lions and talking to people who work on bears and other issues is like with bears, you sometimes just see them around. You can be hiking and you see them in a field and they're eating berries and you're like, well, I'm not going to walk down that trail, but you can just sort of sit there and watch them. But with mountain lions, really the only experience that a lot of people have with them is that, you know, that scary picture on a ring camera or a dead animal in states where they're hunted. It might be, you know, someone they or they're someone they know hunts one. Luckily, that doesn't happen in California. But you know, there's a scary encounter with livestock. It's almost always in that frightening moment. And so something like that, I think it's great to have, and for it to be a graphic novel, not just a narrative, but to have the visual, because that's how people process so much of this. How did you what was the process like translating for the audience that you're trying to reach with this? Were there new things you had to learn or think about to be able to get this out there in that form?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, it was, you know, I thought like, oh, like, I mean, I work on mountain lions, I wrote the petition, like I think I could do this. I could write this story pretty easily. I don't know why I thought that. It was actually a lot of work, lots more research. I wanted, because part of it again was I wanted it to be as realistic as possible. So I wanted to really make sure I was capturing the right things. And I also, you know, wasn't very familiar with the graphic novel format. And so I just read a lot of graphic novels. And I love them. I wish I had started reading them sooner. I think they do really provide this great way of being able to experience a story, but then also, I don't know, it's almost having the images provides another layer of being able to connect with the story or connect with the characters, whether they're animals or people, you know. And so anyway, read a bunch of graphic novels, and then you know, in terms of the research for the book, because it was also highlighting a lot of other species and the interactions between mountain lions and other species, and also interactions between mountain lions and people, I learned a ton more, which was really fun. You know, I learned about the important role beavers have in our ecosystems, and you know, just even how they move and how they build their dams and make their little mud piles. But I know this is a thing about pumas. So, but I also, you know,
we like other animals too. That's okay.
Yeah. but yeah, I mean, and so even just learning more about how, mountain lions are generally pretty elusive. They are elusive, but they're also pretty solitary, particularly in California. But we're actually learning more and more that they might be more social than we think. In areas where there's lots more resources, they seem to be quite a bit more social and more willing to share food. And so things like that kept this project really fun and exciting, even though it was a lot of work.
Yeah. And were there particular graphic novels or artists or writers that you looked at as inspiration for this piece?
Yeah. So there were a lot, but I'll narrow it down to two. So one is a graphic memoir by Laura Gao called Messy Roots. And it's about her being born in Wuhan, China, moving to Texas when she was very young, and her experience growing up in Texas and like kind of trying to understand and come to terms with her identity as an Asian person, as Asian American, but then also as a queer person. And I think like she tackled so many very serious topics in a way that was still for me relatable, but also like it had this mix of intensity and lightness because there's a lot of funny moments too. And so I felt like the way she was able to have the reader connect with her story was like really awesome. And so that inspired me a lot. And then I don't know if you've ever watched The Watchmen, or not watched, read The Watchmen.
Sure.
But that book, it's very intense. They pack so much information into it. And I was like, wow, you can really pack a lot of information into a graphic novel. And so I really wanted to pack a lot of information into this graphic novel. And so that was another thing that like kind of gave me ideas as to how to be able to put in a lot of information but not be overwhelming on the reader. And so those kind of were the two that I think I'll highlight, but there's so many good ones, so
Yeah, and similarly to Watchmen, yours does sort of have those breaks that are to something that's more in a written format or more scrapbook format, and going back and forth. And what was the name of the first book again?
it's called Messy Roots by
Messy
Laura
Roots.
Gao. Yeah.
Right. Someone in the chat was asking that. Did you know the illustrator before you worked with them on this, or did that come together through
No.
the publisher?
Yeah, well, so yeah, no, we didn't know Meital before we embarked on this journey together. But Greg and I did extensive searching online to see, what who was out there in terms of illustrators, and then also like, looking at, oh, how do we like this style versus that style? What are we seeing that's out there? And so we actually looked at a few profiles and asked for several people to provide like sample pages based on the first chapter of the book that was already written. And Meital came highly recommended, and we really liked her style. And I think she does, I mean, I don't know if I'm biased, but I think she did an amazing job for this book. And I think that like after meeting with her and seeing her sample pages, we just thought that she would be an amazing addition to the team. And it turned out that she actually had taken a scientific illustration class, and so I think that really helps a lot too. And so I think, yeah, really happy to have found Meital, and really glad that she decided to work with us.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit more. I mean, I've written words, but I've never done. I imagine most of our audience has not tried to do a graphic novel or comic book or anything, that sort of collaboration. What's that like? Does it
Yeah.
go from you to them and back, or is it?
Right. Yeah. So I have some slides to show if that would
Sure,
be
we can cut
helpful.
to that whenever you like.
Yeah, okay. I'm gonna share my screen now just because I think while I describe it, it might be easier to also
Sure.
see it. How is that? Can everyone see the slide okay? It looks like a Word document, but it's a PowerPoint slide.
Yep, I see it.
Okay. Okay. So the process of working with Meital was I wrote the story, so I wrote it out, and then here's an example page where I wrote out kind of the text of what words would be on the page, but then also I wrote descriptions for what I was kind of envisioning the panels to look like to kind of keep the story flowing. And then, so this is an example of one of the pages. And then I also, so that like to help Meital kind of understand what I was envisioning beyond my word descriptions, I provided like a bunch of links to photos and videos of kind of like what I was inspired by when I wrote this thing, so that in hopes that she could look at it and get an idea of what I was thinking about, and then she could kind of also come up with what she thinks would look good on the page, right? And so these are some of the examples of like what was linked to the page. And this is like, I mean, this is a mom and her kittens. This page is about a mom and her kittens, which you'll see shortly. But so I would bombard her with like really cute photos of like awesome Puma kittens. But then also this means when the story was a little bit darker, like if an animal is killed on the road or, you know, stuck in a fence, I would also bombard her with some really horrific photos and videos just so that she could, you know, have an idea of how to draw it. And so I would give her the chapters and then she would give me sketches. And so this is what her pencil sketches would look like before, and then that would give me time to we could like have a discussion about like if we wanted revisions, what looked good, what do we think we should change or whatever. And then this is actually what became the final product of that page. So I don't know if I made it more confusing or if it was helpful to have these visuals, but that was kind of the process between me and Meital, where, you know, it started off as a Google Doc with a bunch of links, and then she changed it into pencil sketches that later became the color pages.
And were you, you know, so writing that sort of script kind of writing, I assume that there was some feedback from her in terms of the graphics and what would fit on a page.
Yeah, absolutely. This was very much a collaborative process. And so, you know, as she was going through, sometimes she was like, you know, Tiffany, this isn't going to fit on one page. I have to make it 2 pages. Like that would definitely be something that we were very open to. And, you know, sometimes she'd be like, oh, there's too much text here. Like, you know, maybe is it okay if I take out this phrase? Or like, can we put it here? Or is there another way to word it? And so in terms of the flow and the imagery, she played a huge role in that. So it was very much a collaboration.
Very cool. So I promised a reading, and while you've got your screen share up, do we want to roll ahead to that?
Sure.
And then after the reading, we're going to open it up to questions. We're getting a few really nice ones in the chat and in the Q&A. People can post it there, or and Chelsea can read them off. And
Great.
I can't remember, Chelsea will correct me if I'm wrong about this, but I think that people can also raise their hand. But I may be wrong about that. We may just want them all typed.
Okay. Well, happy to do any and all of that.
Right, but think about that, and we'll be taking those in a few minutes after this reading.
Cool. Okay, so here's the cover, and then you know, there's me, but then also here's Meital Smith again, who's the amazing illustrator of the book. Let's see, hopefully this works the way I want it to. I guess, sorry, I'm gonna do just a quick kind of explanation of my idea as I was picking the slides for this. So I'm going to show some pieces that kind of talk about that are part of the Puma story, but then also just talk about Puma ecology and behavior. And then I also wanted to show you some slides that that Josh kind of referred to, where they're like a little bit, it's more scientific asides. They're not part of the story, but I wanted to include them just to give a little bit more context of the landscape and the species. And then also there are people involved too. And so I wanted to give you an idea of what that looks like too. So, okay. Pumas are ambush predators. They quietly and patiently stalk their prey. Large kills provide food for several days. She caches her kill during the day as she rests, and sorry, I don't know if you could hear that. These brothers will spend 1 to 2 years with their mom, relying on her for food and learning how to survive. And so these are the kind of the scientific asides that I just mentioned. And Meital had a really great idea of making them, look like a scientific journal. Okay. So pumas support biodiversity. Pumas are considered keystone species in part because their kills feed many other animals. Scavengers from bears to beetles benefit from the puma's efforts. And you can see a black bear eating a carcass while the gray foxes are patiently waiting. The golden eagle's sharp talons give it the upper hand and first dibs, even though the California condor is much bigger. And again, there's the golden eagle eating while the condors have to wait. Wildlife cameras focused on deer carcasses have helped scientists understand the variety of species that puma kills support. They have also helped identify animals that are not always thought of as scavengers, like songbirds and woodpeckers. And so there you can see a ruby-crowned kinglet and a downy woodpecker. Puma kills provide an important food source for an incredible diversity of invertebrates too. Researchers have documented hundreds of beetle species at kill sites. And so at the top we have red-legged hand beetle and a rogue beetle, and then below, where the carcass is more decayed, a different suite of species up here. You see the margin burying beetle, the yellow-bellied burying beetle, and the hide beetle. These kills also enrich the soil by providing nutrients for microbial communities and other below-ground systems, like mycorrhizal networks. Even trees and other vegetation benefit from the carcass. And so now I'm switching over to where we can see more people. And just to give you some background on this, the scientists actually saw our main character mountain lion, who gets tagged as C8, in a wildlife camera. And so once they saw him, they set up a trap so that they could add him to their study. And so this is them waiting as the trap is set. So the scientists wait nearby so they can process the puma quickly and reduce stress on the animal. If left in the cage for too long, pumas can become overstressed and hurt themselves trying to escape. And so there, that is the trap cage. And so then here's a scientist, and she got a signal on her phone that says cage door shut. It's go time. The scientists tranquilize him so they can measure his vitals, take blood samples, and attach a radio collar around his neck to learn more about his movement patterns. They move with coordinated efficiency to minimize the time needed to process the puma. Sedatives only last so long, and the less time spent near humans, the better for wild animals. And so here they are, she's checking his heart. They're putting on the radio collar, measuring his teeth, taking some blood samples, and then providing fluids to kind of help him recover from this ordeal. And then here's just more, as Josh mentioned, in my past, I was a herpetologist. I'm still a herpetologist. And so I study a lot of amphibians. And so here are some, I wanted to show you some other scientists and other people just in the book. And basically what's happening here is a wildfire has gone through the area. So you can see in the background, a lot of the landscape is burned. And now folks are just seeing what kind of recovery is there. So after the winter rains, more survivors emerge. Biologists with special permits can conduct surveys to see how animals respond to fire. It's great to see all this breeding activity after the wildfire. So in the water, there are egg masses for Pacific chorus frog, California newts, and California red-legged frogs. This gravid female looks ready to burst. I bet she can't wait to get those eggs out. And then you can see he's holding a rough-skinned newt. And then this person is using American Sign Language to sign frog, while the little girl is holding a California red-legged frog. This poor turtle got burned pretty badly, but she's surviving. And so there's a Western pond turtle. And then here's a California king snake whooshing away as the scientists pass. And so that's all I have. Again, the book was published by Reverberations Books, and which is an imprint of Chin Music Press. And if you're interested and want to connect, you can find me on Instagram and Twitter, and you can also find Meital on Instagram. And I also have a QR code if folks are interested to connect with Chin Music Press and get the book.
And someone had asked if this was available in paperback and hardcover both.
Just paperback.
Paperback.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So I'm going to stop sharing. Does that seem like a good time to do that?
Sure.
Okay.
And then we can turn it over to Chelsea to read us off some questions. And I'll say I really appreciated how many of the scientists that you showed, like it's not just when you ask school kids to draw a scientist, it's usually, a white guy with fluffy white hair and a lab coat.
Yeah.
And it really did show the full diversity of scientists and all the different ways that scientists look in the field and behave. And I really appreciated that as well.
Oh yeah, I'm glad. I'm glad. I mean, as someone who has experienced a lot of that and also been misunderstood as a person who wears a lab coat all the time, it was definitely something personal in the book, and so I'm glad it came through.
All right, we have some questions that came in. So it's your book is very well researched. I noticed you incorporated recent scientific studies. One point not mentioned in the book is that California is the only Western state where cougars or bobcats aren't recreationally hunted or trapped. And California also has much better policies on handling conflicts that emphasize coexistence. In several states, cougars are hunted year-round or killed just for wandering into towns. Would you write a sequel set in another state like Nevada or Arizona discussing these challenges?
Yeah, that's a great point, and that is one thing that is pretty awesome about California. And I think several people ask about writing a sequel, and I think I don't want to get too ahead of myself. And right now, it seems like let's see how this book does, and if people are connecting with it. I think your idea of having another similar book out there for Pumas in other states is a really great idea, because you're right, there are lots of different issues that they face in different states. I think part of it too is I live in California, I work on California issues, and so that's kind of what I was best suited for. And so I think I guess I would say I'm not sure if there's a sequel in sight, but if not, I highly encourage others to maybe take that on that task, because I think it would be a really great story.
All right, next question. You talked a little about this already, but I'm curious to hear more how you adjusted your storytelling techniques for this graphic novel and how your personal experiences informed your storytelling approach. For example, as a scientist, as an advocate / organizer at CBD, and your lived experiences in the field.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's a great question. And I think all those things were really integrated into this book. I mean, a lot of the book is, the research I did on, the different species and their behaviors and their biology, but also, and the interactions with people, but then also it was, a lot of it was my lived experience. So that last slide I just showed you, looking for signs of life in a vernal pool after a fire had burned through is something that I have done. I've gone out and done surveys after wildfires to see, are there still amphibians here? Which ones are here? Who is breeding? And even seeing like that burned western pond turtle, like that is something that I experienced. And so there are definitely snippets like that that inform the book and also were really important for me to put in the book. Another thing is like I work a lot on connectivity issues, and so road ecology comes up a lot. And I've worked with several community organized groups that are really worried about newts, because newts are being killed by the thousands on very short stretches of road, trying to get from their upland habitat to their breeding grounds, and which are pools of water. And so, that was something that I felt was really important to put into this story as well, because this is stuff that is happening in our backyard. Community scientists are going out there, making these observations, bringing it up to agencies and to places where they think they need to do more to protect the wildlife. And so I thought those stories are really powerful. And I'm lucky to be able to engage with them and be part of that. And so I thought that was also really important to show, because I think sometimes people think, well, the scientists are doing this thing, there's no way that I'm not a scientist, so like I can't help in any way. But I think that's not true. There are definitely lots of ways people can help, particularly if they care about what's around them and in their backyards. And so a lot of those things are lived experiences that are then put into this book. In terms of translating it into more a graphic novel style, I think it took a lot of, so I showed you that Google Doc that had all the links with the photos and the videos. And I think it was, even though I was like doing all that to kind of help Meital like get an idea of what I was thinking about, it also helped form my ideas of like what's happening out there or what could be happening out there. And so I think, trying to find ways to have sometimes the words tell the story, but then sometimes just the images tell the story, just kind of was something that I had to work a lot on. And it was challenging because it is a different way of communicating than I am used to. And so I think it just really, that's where reading all the graphic novels really helped. And then looking at those images and looking at those videos to try to, encapsulate a storyline that made sense, and that we could put into this book. So hopefully I answered at least part of your question or some of your question, but that, yeah.
All right, next question. What were some of the things you were hoping to include in the book but didn't have space for?
Yeah. Ooh, lots of good stuff. One thing that came to mind recently, because someone else had asked me a question slightly different but related, is like I said, I like this story is about pumas, but I think there's so many cool critters around us. And again, I live in California, so when I go on walks or on hikes, I get to see them, so which I feel pretty lucky about. And so I really wanted to share that. And as I was writing this book, this study came out about arboreal salamanders, who some of them, there's several different species of them, and some of them live really high up in the redwoods, like hundreds of feet up in the sky, where like tree voles also live. And when they feel threatened, they just jump off the branch. And so the scientists were like, oh my gosh, they just jump off the branch. Do they survive? Like, that's an interesting defense mechanism. And so then they started studying it, and what they found was they took salamanders that live really high up, and they took salamanders that live in the middle, and then they took salamanders that live on the ground, and they put them in wind tunnels to see if, they had certain aerodynamics or something. And what they found was the ones that live really high up are able to glide. And so they can just glide down to the next branch pretty safely. Whereas the ones on the ground just don't have that ability. They're flopping all over the place in the wind tunnel. And so I kind of wanted to try to make that a scientific aside. But it was just too far from I think what the story was. And I think it was, oh, hey, Neha. Yeah, it was a really cool study. And, but I think it just, unfortunately, I couldn't find a way to fit it in. And I thought it was probably more important. And I wanted to show a little bit more like, the scientific sides that show the rat poisons and how it affects pumas, but it also affects other wildlife, and it can actually affect pets and people. And then also, there's a scientific side about how veterinarians are treating animals that are burned with tilapia skin. And so there's just so much cool stuff. So I'm glad I was able to fit some of that stuff in, but there was definitely a lot of other stuff I think would have been fun, but unfortunately didn't make the cut.
Here's an easy one. Are you doing a book tour?
Kind of. Yeah. I do have a few events set up. Some have already passed, but right now we still have a few more events in California, in Santa Rosa and San Francisco. And I'm hoping to get more on that list, but so far it's been pretty West Coast related.
Okay, there's two questions that kind of go hand in hand here. Do you think the subject matter and depictions are okay for kids ages 10 and above? Someone's asking who the main target audience is for.
Yeah, this is a great question. A lot of people ask me this. So it is a young adult book, and I would say it's good for 10 and up. It is pretty realistic, but also hopeful. And I think one thing that helps in terms of accessibility is that the color scheme, it's the browns and yellows, kind of actually helps with scenes that are like the mountain lion killing a deer, where the blood is yellow. It's not like this deep red, and so it is less abrasive. And so I think in some ways it also depends on the individual. I know Josh was talking about his kids potentially reading it, and so I think as a parent, I don't know, Josh, do you have any insights on that?
Well, I'll have to field test it with them, but my kids have also grown up in a biologist's household and are probably more familiar with the nature red in tooth and claw than every household might be. But I agree that it's not, it's certainly no more graphic. It's probably less graphic than some of the cartoons that they watch. So yeah, I think I've got an 8 and 11-year-old, so I think I'm not worried about them handling that part of it.
Okay, let's do 2 more questions here. Would you consider presenting this work at an educational centered conference like AERA or NARST?
And I would put the National Science Teachers Association or California on that same list.
Most definitely. Yeah, I'd be happy to. And honestly, I guess I didn't fully answer the audience question. So I think to me, ideally, this book is meant to be an educational tool. Hopefully it's a fun story, and I think it's amazing art by Meital. But I think it would be really amazing to have this in school curriculums. And so yeah, I would definitely be open to and actually look forward to doing presentations at conferences like that for sure.
And then someone's asking if you could share the cover photo of the book again.
Yeah.
So my share really quick. Let me see. While you pull that up.
Okay. Wait. My screen. I'll just make this bigger so that we don't have to go through all the slides again. But there's the cover.
Yeah. All right, and then okay, and that's it for questions. If anyone else has questions, they can email it to info@mountainlion.org and I can pass those along.
And the recording of this is going to be posted on our website and our YouTube channel, certainly within a few days, if not less. And that'll all be available, and we'll have links to places where people can get their own copy.
Yeah. Yep. All right.
And I think that we're gonna wrap it up soon. I want to encourage anyone who, if you enjoyed this, next month's webinar is going to be with our executive director, Brent Lyles. He's going to be talking about the year in mountain lions, what we've been up to, and what we're looking forward to coming up in 2024, including, fingers crossed, a vote on that CISA petition.
Yeah.
And also, I want to remind everyone that the Tuesday after Thanksgiving is Giving Tuesday, and it's a good time to support your favorite nonprofits, which hopefully includes the Mountain Lion Foundation. And as holiday gift giving season comes up, of course, Tales of the Urban Wild is for sale near you. Good for readers of all ages. And you can find, and our float campaign, our t-shirt campaign is active this week, and you can find links to that on our website as well. And buy yourself a nice t-shirt or t-shirt for your favorite mountain lion fan out there in the world. Thank you all for coming. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Tiffany. Thanks to all the audience. And we'll see you all next month for that webinar. You can sign up the QR code that's there on the screen or on our website at mountainlion.org.